Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. You're in the right place, the perfect place, if you're looking for a wellness check-in team whose goal is to remind you to think about wellness and encourage you to make wellness a priority. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well.
This is episode 35.
A territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people. As part of a reconciliation process, we make our podcast from lands located within the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We are treaty people, responsible to honor the original caretakers and to serve as stewards for the land. It is Sammy and John for What's on Your Mind on Let's Be Well Together podcast. And today we're back to our facet activities series. Just to give some context, I'll keep saying this for the next few just until people are used to it. But the theory I'm exploring is that there's different categories of wellness, and we want to enrich each of them. And instead of it being mysterious, how do you become more physically well or economically well? I want to try and simplify things and make it work off common sense. So I'm working on these bullet point lists of activities for each category that foster wellness. And we want to take the opportunity on What's on Your Mind to talk about some of them. Yeah. And in a perfect world, we're going to start hearing from our listeners, whether on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, or send us an email. There's our link on our website. And we'll hear what you guys do to foster wellness in your categories. And today I'd like to talk about spiritual. And I want to talk about it not in the context of religion. I think a lot of people can understand how to be spiritual in the context of a religion, but I want a lot of our discussions to be about being spiritual, whether together with religion or without religion, right? But not tied to religion. One of the things that I note in my book is that I connect having a sense of right and wrong with values that guide as being something that's spiritual. It helps connect me with others. It helps connect me with ideas of right and wrong. And I, for my own part, it helps me on a spiritual level. Yeah. I studied ethics in philosophy, and it was my favorite subject. So I've read a lot about different kinds of ethical theories. And, you know, there's things like utilitarianism, where you're supposed to calculate a value associated with each act and how much it adds value to the world. Right. Yeah. There's social contractarianism, where we know that unless we cooperate together, life is brutish and short. So we all kind of sign on to a contract where we kind of agree to moderate our behavior for the good of all. Right. And there's a whole bunch of theories, and I'm not going to say, you know, which one I ascribe to. But I do just want to make the point that I consider myself, separate from religion, a very ethical person. I always try, on any important decision, I try and be guided by doing the right thing. And boy, we could have so many different conversations about that. Definitely. And what about you, Sammy? Do you think about right and wrong? Is it more intuitive for you? How do you approach it?
It's like hard, definitely, to fully know, I feel like, what's right and wrong. You can only really say that for yourself, because sometimes I find I think something is really right, and I don't understand why someone else is doing something that I would never do. And then I can find myself in like a judgmental place. So I try to step back and understand, like, where is that judgment coming from? Typically it's coming from like care and love. And I really love this person and I don't want to see them hurt or upset or going down a wrong path. But again, like, who am I to decide what's right and wrong for them? I can really only decide that and act on things based on what I feel is right and wrong for myself. That's kind of where I come at from that side, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm actually trying to focus a little bit more on, as opposed to considering whether other people do things that are right or wrong. If you're faced with a tough decision, do you think about right and wrong? And if you do, how do you come up with it? But before you answer, I'll just give you some context too, that it's one of the ways Sheila and I are so different. It's not like every time I do something, I go through a process of deciding I have to calculate whether this is the correct thing to do or whether this is an evil thing. But sometimes I stop and I try and figure out what the right thing to do is. And I may be a bit more intuitive because I've lived a long time and I have a sense of it. Or I may actually try and apply some thinking as to figure it out.
Yeah.
Sheila, as long as I've known her, is way more intuitive.
Yeah.
So she doesn't go through kind of a philosophical process.
No, yeah.
But interestingly, we often come up with the exact same position.
Right.
And, it really makes you wonder if people just know what the right thing to do is.
Yeah.
If we're both coming up with it from a different angle. Mm-hmm. So I don't want, I'm not trying to put you on the spot and say, what theory do you use to figure out right? Wrong?
Yeah.
But do you feel it sometimes? Like, I really should do this. And maybe you don't, maybe you do. If you don't, do you feel guilty? If you do you feel good about it?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I, for the most part, know when it's the right thing to do and versus when it's the wrong thing to do. And typically when I'm doing something that I know this is the wrong thing to do right now, but for the most part, like if I'm doing something that I know I shouldn't be doing, I am kind of like coming from a place of like either laziness or I just don't have the energy to like have this conversation or
maybe it's just something that's too hard to say no to.
Too hard to say. Yeah, definitely. I definitely have that issue too. But I definitely don't see black and white either. And I know like that's probably where we can be different sometimes because I think studying law, you do see a lot of like right or wrong. And in my program, I was in a lot of courses with law students and it was just funny, the differences in when we were in those classes between the law students and the peace and conflict studies, because we were kind of taught to see more of like a spectrum and like there's a lot of different paths, there's a lot of different ways of what can be right and wrong, versus when I was taking my law courses, it was like, this is textbook, this is wrong. So I struggle with that sometimes of, is it black and white or are there other things I could do that could also be right? You know?
I think that's just fascinating, but I'm going to tell you a little twist to that story too. I think you're right, but with an exception.
Yeah.
So there's an evolution when you're a law student and then a practicing lawyer. And from my experience, probably you're right that as a young lawyer, justice.
Black and white. Yeah.
Right and wrong. Look at the law. I should win.
Right.
And then, in my world as a litigation lawyer, I'm before judges often, and I realize there is a lot of gray.
Yeah.
And a lot of gray is recognized. And ultimately, like at the end of the day, most litigation disputes, civil litigation, are disputes about what to do in a business situation or a contract situation. And there are cases where there's definitely, you either have to say, yes, this complies with the contract or no, but there's so many cases with so much gray area.
Yeah.
And so you do get a lot more comfortable with the gray area as you progress in the legal career. And I think similarly, I think you make a good point about on the moral side. Sometimes there's a lot of gray area and it's not clear.
Yeah, it's hard to see or hard to understand what to do. And then when you go to someone, I find I'll be like, I need your opinion on, should I do this or should I do this? And then when they say I should do the thing that I didn't really want to do, I'm like, shoot, I knew it. Like I knew
second
that's
opinion.
what I'm supposed to do. I know, a second opinion. I shouldn't have got it, but
the point, anyway, one of the points I want to talk about for this is why it helps me and why I feel connectedness to this approach. So I'm going to go back to one of the Michael Herman interviews. It was a second one. And when I asked him the question at the end, he was talking about hope. And when he was talking about building hope, he talked about, I can't remember who it was, but it was a Czech leader. And his quote was something to the effect that I won't get the certainty of an outcome. Yeah. But if I act knowing that it's the right thing to do, with a good, or if I'm act knowing that there's a really good reason to do it, then that gives me hope. And it makes sense because, and that's kind of my approach on ethics too. If I think about, if I have a tough decision to make and I take time to think like, this is important. Yeah. I want to do the right thing. And I come up with a reason why I think it's the right thing. And then I do that right thing. That gives me a lot of comfort. Yeah. And a connectedness to spirituality in some way.
Definitely.
Even if the outcome isn't what I want.
Yeah.
Because I can never control the outcome.
100%. Yeah.
There's just so many variables. It depends so much on other people. and the human mind is limited in terms of what it can even foresee happening. So
yeah, it's interesting because I was actually talking with so my sister-in-law, Chanel. This was a couple months ago, but we were kind of talking about, I don't know if this happens to you, but when something happens in your personal life and then your mind just constantly replays that moment. And I was talking to her about it, and it's almost like a sense of guilt, or you should have done something differently. You should have said something differently. And she was like, if that's happening to you, and say it was an interaction with someone and you felt bad about that interaction, she said, I always say to go back to that person and have the conversation again, or apologize the way that you meant to, or, you know, try to resolve that issue in your head, because your head's just going to keep playing that until you feel resolved. And I think that's something that's important to do as well.
all these things are tying in together. So we had a conversation a little while ago about the difference between expectations and goals.
Right.
Expectations being something where you think you're going to achieve something, and when you don't, you just feel bad.
Yeah.
Goals being something you want to achieve, you try to achieve.
Yeah.
It's and I think kind of in the same vein I was just talking about, whether you do your best not knowing you can control the outcome, and you don't always achieve it. But if you then, and I think this touches on what you're saying, whether you call it learning a lesson from it, whether you call it growing, whether you call it realizing that next time I have to approach things differently.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. That you should deal with it. And the next time maybe you don't, or because maybe you can't go back to the person, but
maybe you can,
the next time you'll have a much more visceral sense of, I know there's one thing I shouldn't do. It's what I did last time that made me feel terrible.
Definitely, yeah. And sometimes things that you really hold on to, other people don't even remember. Yeah, so I think that's also important too, even if they don't remember, to still at least try to resolve that in some way, whether that's in the next situation or going back and trying to resolve the issue that happened or anything like that, right?
There's two sides to it. You know, on one hand, if you're worried about what they're thinking, going back to them might help.
Yeah.
But again, you know, we talk so much about self-awareness. I think you're realizing for your own sake, you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
No matter what they say, even if they say, don't worry about it, it's water off my back.
Yeah.
But you had to do it because
you had to say
move forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. We're interviewing in the area of social wellness today, and we are welcoming back Adrian DeCoo. You'll remember that Adrian has been with Rotary since 1986 and recently served as the 100th president of Rotary Club of Kitchener. He's volunteered much time, including many training sessions for Rotarians over more than 20 years. He's received multiple awards from Rotary for his service. Adrian is the founding partner in the training and organizational development firm called Great Lakes Learning Inc. in Waterloo. For more than 35 years, he's had extensive experience working with a variety of clients in areas of leadership training, developing vision, values, and mission statements, team building, and helping organizations evolve. He's a co-author of 3 training books, and he's on the board of directors of Kids Ability, which I love, an organization that helps thousands of children with different challenges to reach communication, social, physical, and behavioral goals. On a personal level, Adrian is a friend and a mentor. Welcome back, Adrian.
It's a pleasure to be here, John.
One of the things I've thought about when it comes to challenges and making things happen is the whole thought about some jobs are just too big. And because they're too big, I don't even try. Because why start on a road that I'll never finish? And one of the amazing things about overcoming that is when I think about, you know, part of social wellness to me is community and the support network and working together. And so the reason I wanted to chat with you is because Rotary has a great example of people working together to achieve great things so that we don't have to give up before we start.
Yeah, John, that's a really good question. I've always understood that team or group performance is driven by individual pursuit of excellence. And what I mean to that, it's the individual desire to succeed. People don't do things because they want to fail. They do things individually because they want to succeed and they want to do it well. So like any team sport, I think, what we do things collectively in Rotary, but it begins with an individual. And one of the best examples that we have locally, and you mentioned Kids Ability a little bit, 65 years ago. And I like to think about it this way. I like to think that some Rotarian, because it came from Kitchener Rotary, that's where Kids Ability came from. I like to think that somebody at Kitchener Rotary 65 years ago said, can you imagine? Can you imagine what it would be like if the kids that we ship to Toronto and to Hamilton for care could have that care even better right here locally?
Yeah, can I just interrupt you just to give some context? Because there'll be people listening from all over.
Right.
Many won't even know what Kids Ability is. So I think just to set the stage, we're saying that there were kids who had different disabilities, and the way that they needed to get treatment initially was Rotarians and other people would volunteer to drive those kids to places like London and Toronto. And for people who don't know our area, that's like an hour and a half away, an hour away. And what you're saying is they thought, what if we could do something closer to home?
Yeah, and 65 years ago, that's what they started. Now that started with an individual. One person had this thought, and it may have been easy to sell that to other people, but one person started it. So the point that you're making, John, is it always starts with one person. It always starts somewhere, and having the foresight and the willingness to make things better in your community through that kind of vision and through that kind of drive results in something that we know as Kids Ability today here in Kitchener-Waterloo. And as you say, John, people may not know who that is, but Kids Ability here in Kitchener-Waterloo now serves 11,000 kids each year. Kids who have autism, kids who have physical and other disabilities. And 11,000 kids actually go through that. So that's one of the things that I think that we might be able to think about as, that coming to fruition because one person started it, and it takes a whole lot of people to make that happen. And it takes even more people to keep that going and growing today. And that's very successful today. So beyond that, I think, John, when you think about how that kind of ratchets up a little bit, when you think about Rotary having not only a service focus locally, but it also has a service focus internationally. And there are internationally, there are 1.2 million Rotarians around the world, virtually in every corner of the world, virtually in every country of the world. And the strength of that actually allows Rotarians to leverage that and to make things happen around the world. And the one example that, John, you and I have talked about is that a number of years ago, Rotary took on as its worldwide focus and initiative is the eradication of polio. And a lot of you may even ask, what is polio? Because we don't know. We haven't had that.
Right.
We don't know anybody who had polio.
It's not a very well-known disease right now.
Exactly, because somebody decided. And again, that's something probably one person thought, wouldn't that be neat if we could take the muscle that Rotary presents around the world and that we can actually get to the point of the eradication of polio? And polio only exists in one small corner of Afghanistan. And I think today there are only 10 cases of polio active in the world today.
Oh my goodness.
And so that's the value of that kind of multiplied individual and group effort.
Well, these are great examples because that's what I was trying to drive at, because I know from my own personal experience, there have been times in my life where I just thought, so I'm that individual, that person who thought, I wonder if we could help kids with disabilities closer to home. Like that wasn't my idea, but I might have an idea. And I just thought, I can't do that. That's too much work. And so I didn't even let my vision start. And now I know that if you can have a vision and if you can work with people, it really does help if they're professionals or tradespeople or people with experience and abilities. The sky's the limit.
And that's the beauty of Rotary. At least, that's the service area that I come from. Rotary really attracts that kind of talent, John. And I think that if I look at our own Rotary Club, we've got lawyers, we've got doctors, we have people who are craftsmen, people who know how to leverage money, people who are bankers, people who know how to build homes, and all these people, they come together, and they've all come together with the same purpose, is that's to serve the community. So anytime we have a project, it's not hard for us to say, how can we do that? I'll tell you a really good example. This is from a number of years ago, and sometimes I ask myself, what makes me proud to be a Rotarian? A number of years ago, our Rotary Club and 5 other Rotary Clubs in town decided to build a house. And we did that with Habitat for Humanity. In 7 days, those Rotary members, and there were hundreds of Rotarians there at that time, in 7 days, we built a house from bottom up to the point where on the 7th day, it's kind of biblical, but on the 7th day, we handed the keys to brand new owners of a house. And to me, that was one of those goosebump moments, the day that we actually gave the keys to this family. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was so rewarding that we did something hands-on and such a great benefit to a part of the community that otherwise would never have been able to afford a home. So, and we continue to do that in Rotary. So it's kind of a nice way of seeing that in action.
Yeah, and of course, we're talking about Rotary because that's your experience. And in this show, we like to talk to people about their own experiences. Just to throw it out there, too, there's lots of other service organizations.
Yes, yeah.
And probably many of them are similar in terms of having people with working in all different fields and doing all kinds of great things.
Yeah, that's the beauty of, again, time. We give our gift of time to wherever we think it's most interesting and most enjoyable. And I know the Lions and the Kiwanis, and these people do absolutely tremendous work. And in a lot of communities, they're the go-to service club. That's all there is. And again, people gravitate to that because it's handy, because it's there. And I know even in our own Kitchener-Waterloo area, we're very proud of the fact that we've got 100 years under our belt. But I also know that the Kiwanis were there 117 years, so they were there way before us.
Right.
But yeah, so you're right, John. There's every bit as much good going on in the community through the service clubs.
One of the places that the areas that I kind of lament, whether it can be changed, whether we have time, is environment. That's another space where hopefully people working together, we instead of giving up from the start and just throwing our hands up, we've got to find a way to solve this environmental problem because things are not going too well. And whether we're beyond the point of no return is still an open question in my mind.
Yeah, John, that's a big issue now in Rotary, if I can go back to Rotary again.
Sure.
This year, a year ago, that actually became one of the Rotary's actually made up of 7 pillars of service. And they added, or 6 pillars, and they added a 7th one a year ago, and that was the environment. Now the unintended consequence and bonus of that is that the environment is very attractive for young people. And in a lot of ways now, Rotary becomes more attractive for young people because we're putting a lot of focus on how we can help and how we can improve the environment, not only in our own backyard, but the environment to me is also a larger picture perspective. We know that global warming is having tremendous effects on migration and migration, especially in the areas where soil doesn't work anymore. People have to move away from there. These are huge humanitarian problems, and it's something that Rotary is looking at trying to help out. And this is something that's outside of our own sphere here, but it's certainly a worldwide issue. That's kind of the larger picture perspective of what the environment needs help in. What can we do locally? We can help with cleanup. We can help with planting trees. We can do all kinds of local projects, which our Rotary Club does. So we can get a lot of hands-on, but we can also worry about the larger picture perspective as well.
Okay, well, look, just before I turn to my last question, which you now know because you've been through this once, let me ask you this. So now when I joined Rotary, I wasn't sure what it was all about, actually. And for example, I wondered if it was associated with a religious group or some kind of, special handshake. And of course, I found out none of that is true. It's all just regular people from all kinds of denominations, different professionals. What would you say to a young person who thinks, and whether it's Rotary or some other service club, that's a bunch of old people who are doing their thing and it's not really my place and I don't really get it. What would you say to somebody like that?
John, this is a long answer. If I can
take as much time as you want.
So I remember a number of years ago, this is like 40 years ago, I remember I met an old high school teacher who was retired, and he worried endlessly about his legacy. And that word legacy kind of stuck in my brain, and I've thought about it for years and years and years. And I'm always trying to wrestle with, well, what does legacy really mean? And I think I've come up with three components that legacy actually means. And the first legacy that I think that we all leave behind is one of relationships. And by that, I mean how we relate to family, friends, business, and social acquaintances. A lot of people will say, well, my family is my legacy, or my kids are my legacy. I think it's more than that. It's the relationship that we have with those people that's your legacy. So it goes beyond family. It goes to acquaintances, people we meet in everyday life, how we're regarded by those around us. And that image lives on after us. And the second component, I think, is one of intellectual or professional or craft pursuit. Things that we enjoy doing, things that we're very good at. Perhaps it's a book you've written, or you're good at woodworking, or you're very successful at business, or you're an excellent photographer, or you were a great teacher that maybe changed lives. And that too lives beyond us. But the third one, which is kind of my roundabout way of getting to this, I think the third component of legacy is service. It's service to others. It's what we give back to the community and to the world. And that's why I think of Rotary as the vehicle that allows me to do that, to give back to the community and to provide some value and to ensure that we've helped change lives for the better. So that's kind of the way I see those components fitting together. And in the end, it's really service that's kind of the icing on all of this, because that's the kind of thing that we really have to work at actively. And I think a lot of young people want to do that. And I think what they want to do is, I say, cycling way back, John, to when we talked the last time, it really goes back to that idea of how well do we listen to what their needs are, and how well do we ask questions, and how well do we understand, and then how well do we provide an environment that allows them the vehicle to express themselves this way.
Well, it would sure be nice if we can, because my own personal experience is that giving back, helping people, in part, I see this podcast as a way to try and do that. Sure. It is some of the most rewarding parts of my life. And so it's very enjoyable. And so you certainly hope that you can open up that opportunity for other people to enjoy that. So here we are at the end. And I'm going to go back. Now, you already know what this question is. So we'll have to see how you're doing now. But the question we ask every guest, which is about different areas of wellness and all of us trying to keep balance in a very busy life when it's very difficult. If you think about different categories of wellness in your life, are there any that you're neglecting right now? And if so, can you think of even one thing you can do to try and foster wellness in that area?
Yeah, and it's almost a given, but yeah, the social aspect, John. I obviously COVID has really put a damper on that, and I really feel it personally. I feel I miss that connection with people. I miss that being able to sit together and have a coffee and just shoot the breeze about stuff, whatever there is in life, and that's something that's huge in my loss, I guess, over the last couple of years, and that's something that I look forward to changing dramatically, only because the conditions will allow it. So I'm truly looking forward to that. But when I look back on it, and I think, boy, that's an element that's really been a difficulty for a lot of us, and certainly has been for me personally.
I was just thinking, when we were off tape, we were just talking about starting to feel better again. You're going through a bit of a back surgery and whatnot, and started to feel better. I never really thought of it, but socials like that too. I never thought I'd hear myself say, if I could only just get back to normal, it would be so amazing. Yeah. So you normally, you have a really bad cold, or you've got the flu, and you just think to yourself, oh, if I could just feel normal again. And then when you finally do, it's amazing. And that's kind of what's happening with our social lives right now. Like, I am actually a bit anxious sometimes now when I get into a big group. It takes me a minute or two to kind of get my bearings. So Oh, I hope you're right. I can't wait for things to, we're recording this interview at a certain time. By the time it airs, maybe we'll have been back to normal already, but I hope that's true.
Yeah. Hopefully. I hope you're right, John.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. I appreciate your time again, and hopefully we can have another conversation on another day.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of the Adventures of the Starving Artist. This past weekend was a big driving and performance-filled weekend for me. I was headed down to the Kitchener and Cambridge area for a couple of shows, one of which takes place at the law firm where John, of this very podcast, happens to work. So that was pretty cool. The interesting part about this weekend was that even though the performances went off without a hitch, everything going up to the performances was it was a disaster. It was curveballs left and right. But we made it through. So the morning of, I left Ottawa very early. I was on the road by, I think, 7:45 in the morning. And the music store wasn't open. Not a huge deal, except that I had discovered while loading my car up that my music stand had broken. No biggie. When I get down to Kitchener or Cambridge, I'll hit the music store there, get a replacement, right? So that's happening. I get down there. I get through the Toronto traffic, which is always that is a test of endurance. I'll put it that way. Make it through that. I get to Cambridge and, all right, I'll hit up Long and McQuaid and grab a music stand. What I didn't know was that all of all the roads leading up to the particular location were under construction, so I couldn't really get over there. It took me a minute to figure that out, but I parked a few blocks away, walked it, got it sorted. And I get to the where we're performing, and I meet the trio. We hadn't played together as a trio before this moment, so that was kind of interesting, but we did fine, I think. And as I'm setting things up, my mic stand broke. The part that keeps the mic stand upright just gave out, so that stinks. But rolled with the punches, kept going. I get all the things set up for a little sound check, and half of my PA system blows out. The one speaker just dies before we're supposed to play. So it was like a whole bunch of... Everything broke on me on Thursday. Just everything broke. But we rolled with it. We got it done. Played some tunes. And we were invited to come back for their next event, which is always a good thing. Later on in the actual weekend proper, on Saturday, Shy Harry and I played over at Langdon Hall for a private birthday function. And playing at Langdon is always such a treat. It was a beautiful night. Not too hot, not too humid. No bugs. Just a wonderful night celebrating a birthday and playing tunes. That's all I've got for you this week. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners, and it's great that you could join us. We could use your help. How? Listen to our episodes. Subscribe to us and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together. And make sure you tell your friends about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
So today's chat comes from one of those classic water cooler connections. So I was getting coffee. I bumped into my colleague and friend, Khiam, and I was lamenting because I don't really have that good energy feeling of when my core is in shape. And Khiam said, well, I feel great right now. And I said, why? And Khiam said she's doing a couple things. One is Pilates, and she's also enjoying a tea. So I said, Khiam, can we talk about that on the podcast? She said yes, and here we are. So today, this first one, I just want to talk about the Pilates. So welcome, Khiam.
Thanks, John. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great. It's always energizing, too, when you hear somebody else who's feeling good from exercise. Yeah. So I'm like, I got to talk to Khiam and get inspired. So tell me a little bit about Pilates. Now, I've heard of it. I have a really good sense that it's a really good thing to do, especially for your core. So how'd you get into it and how'd it start?
Well, I started concentrating more and focusing more on my workouts when the pandemic hit and gyms closed. And I had one of those gym memberships that I was just paying for every month and not really using.
Me too.
And so when the pandemic hit, and maybe you did too, I just found myself working a lot. And so I really needed something to take me away from my desk. And my back was really hurting just from sitting in front of the computer all day. And so I was really looking for a workout that would help my core, all around core. And so when we think about the core, I think a lot of people just think about abs. But in actuality, your core also includes your lower back, your hips, your obliques, and it's really all of that trunk space in the midsection of your body. And so I discovered an app called Fit On, and it's a free app. I don't remember who recommended it to me, but I discovered it, and I found these Pilates exercises that were amazing for so many different reasons. Pilates focuses on your core. It focuses on controlled movement, so slow and controlled and precise movement.
So you're precise and you're holding positions. You're
That's
moving.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, it builds strength, and the focus is on not building muscle, but toning and lengthening muscles too.
Which is what I want.
Yeah, I found it really challenging. I think a lot of times people think of Pilates as a girl's workout. You know, I think Madonna was famous for doing Pilates, and if you look at her body, it's incredible.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I know that at a certain point I thought that, but then I actually, for whatever reason, I don't know if I was watching a TV show that somebody was doing it, but I saw somebody doing Pilates and I was like, wow, that looks hard.
Yeah, it is. It is hard, and it's the slow, precise, controlled movements that I find challenging. It also has a focus on your mind, like it's supposed to be a mind-body thing because I think it's because it's slow and controlled. You're really focused on your breathing, and you're really targeting specific areas when you're doing Pilates, and so it allows you to just kind of fall into the workout. You have to clear your mind in order to be able to perform the precise movements. And the workouts aren't long. Different workouts, most of the times my workouts are 15 to 20 minutes. And I probably do Pilates 3 times a week. And so one day I'll do an ab workout, and one day it'll be focused on legs, and one day it'll be focused on arms. I don't do just Pilates. I supplement it with cardio, and I supplement it with some weight training. But certainly my workouts as a whole, I'm doing more Pilates than any other type of workout. And I'm really feeling great. Like I'm noticing a difference. I'm more toned. My muscles are leaner and they're longer, and I am really getting the results that I want from it. And it's not expensive. You don't need weights. Sometimes my Pilates workouts include bands. I just need a mat, and you're using body weight. You can use body weight 100% of the time. So it's a really accessible workout. And you can do it anywhere, in the backyard, on the beach. I do it in my bedroom, in front of a mirror. It's just accessible and easy, and it feels great.
Yeah, there's so many spins I can take off on some of the things you said, but a couple of them, that's a message I'm trying to get out too. Like for my own mind, I see core as a different kind of training than aerobic and strength. I see them all as necessary, but core is different. So you're not only doing core, but one thing and so you talk about the good feeling. I never really thought about the lengthening muscles, but you're right. Mm-hmm. You also talked about not just being abs, and I agree with that too. Like for me, I noticed in my back, I became more mobile in a lot of different areas when I worked on my core. Yeah. But for me, I don't know why, and I hope it's not just in my head, it's this real energizing feeling. It's if I can get that whole core going, it almost feels like there's almost like electricity coming from that core area and energizing me in everything I do.
I certainly feel stronger.
Right.
Right. And when your core is strong, I'm not slouching. My posture is better. And I think for people like you and I who sit at a desk all day, that lower back region is such a troublesome spot for us. And so it's reversing, you do your ab workouts, and then focusing on the lower back really helps to straighten everything out. And I feel stronger. Like I feel like I'm moving faster. I feel like you're right. I feel like there's a spring to my step.
Yeah, in everything you do. You could be walking to get that water or coffee.
Yeah.
Or in everything. Okay, well, that's great. So thanks very much. I'm wishing you all the best in continuing this Pilates adventure.
Thanks, John.
And I think I'm going to look into it myself.
Good.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. I'll be running along, listening to music or podcast, And then I realized, I've been thinking about something for so long, I'm going to have to go back and go back in the podcast to see what I missed, or that I missed a whole song or more. Like that happened today. I was thinking back in history, and I was thinking there's at least 2 roads, and I was on the first for most of my life, and I think it's the most obvious one. The demands of life shepherd me forward onto it, and you don't stop. You don't stop to look for another approach. The journey was a fairly smooth one most of the time, and I probably had a false sense of security. I minimized the impact when I ran into bad weather, awkward situations, or even dangerous scenarios. You just batten down the hatches and get through it. Potholes and speed bumps tripped me up, and some falls taught me lessons. Others only left scars or shame or self-doubt. I buried painful memories, and life prodded me forward as it does. I felt I just couldn't stop or even slow down. I reacted at the last second to what was just in front of me, not stopping to think. I could only ever see a short distance ahead. I didn't shine a light further down the road. I didn't look for another way forward. I kept putting up with the potholes and the scars. And now I know there's another way, a smoother road that provides more protection through bad weather. But I could only see it after I stopped to take a look at myself and what I was going through and what I was missing. I had to listen to my own body. I had to stop living outside myself and feel what it was to be human on a physical level. I had to move forward with my body in sync with my mind. I had to listen to people who navigated the road before me. What did they learn? I didn't try and figure out a different way forward until I had many scars and hit a low point. I'm telling my story in the hope that others might avoid the mistake I made. But I know that's doubtful. I wonder if it's the human condition. Maybe we all need to experience the hard knocks before we're ready to learn. Maybe we're not receptive to introspection or self-awareness or lessons from others until we stumble, scar, and hit a low point. Maybe the first road's inevitable for all of us, and maybe so, but I am an eternal optimist. So I'm going to tell my story, and maybe, just maybe, it'll provide a better way forward for someone, and hopefully at a younger age. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
So we do these sessions, and then ultimately we hear them on podcasts. A lot of times we don't hear them for a while until after, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, maybe in a couple of months after we do them. And we earlier did a podcast about skepticism, not getting carried away with skepticism, and Zeno's paradox with the archer and all that stuff. And after we heard it, Sheila and I were just talking, and we came up with a couple other examples.
Right, like with your job, for example, like because you were saying that you really like everything to be perfect and think things, and I was saying, well, with your job in law, you have to make decisions and figure out what you're going to say, and then go to the judge with that. Like nothing's perfect, so you have to go with what you have, and you've really learned a lot from that.
Yeah, and the whole system is set up that way in the sense that it's not just me. So I do my best to get all the evidence, find out what happened, tell the correct story, get the facts right. But you're right. You only have so much time in the day, and you only have so many witnesses available, and people's memories are only what they are.
Exactly. You just don't ever really know the whole story.
And for sure, the judge rarely knows the whole story. I mean, sure, there's a few cases where things are quite obvious, but somebody had to go to court just because of circumstances. Think about a murder case where it's obvious that the murderer did it. There's maybe, on film or something, but forget that. Like, in most of the cases, especially in my world, in the civil world, you'll never know ultimately what happened, and you just do the best you can. And the judge knows that they're going to try hard. Mm-hmm. They're going to try and figure out what happened as best they can. But they often have to make a decision based on imperfect facts with a good sense of what happened.
Right.
So if somebody came forward with either a dogmatic approach or a skeptical approach, we're talking about skepticism, and said, but what about this? But what about that? And that's exactly what both lawyers are doing in their arguments.
Yeah.
If the judge had to say, okay, well, there's a possible hole in the theory, I can't decide for either person.
Right. Neither one's perfect, so I can't make a decision. Like, they don't do that.
The system would break down.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It's the same in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
our own system breaks down. If we're so skeptical that we need 100% proof of everything before we act, we'll never get anything done.
Right. Now you want to tell a story that you didn't put in your book.
Right.
I don't know what that was.
Okay. It has to do with politicians.
Okay.
I was trying to explain it, and the problem is it just took like a page and a half, and ultimately it just
didn't fit.
It didn't fit, didn't seem interesting in the context. But
Right.
It is a good story, which is, imagine this happens almost all the time.
Okay.
Any party, so it's not partisan.
Right.
Somebody wants to get elected, and so they make promises.
Right.
So I'm going to take a simple, the example I was thinking was, imagine there's somebody new running for city council. And so city council is different than federal and all that stuff. And the reason why they're really interested in running is because there's a couple issues that affected their community. So think about this, for example, let's say people live on the one side of a river and there's only one bridge. And so commuting is horrible. People can't get over the bridge. So there's a big movement to build another bridge or two bridges. Mm-hmm. So this is really important to them, and their whole platform is based on it. And they get elected, and they promise they're going to build, let's say, 3 bridges. And they get elected on that platform. And then they get into city council, and then they start hearing about all the other issues that people on the other side of the river face, and people who, don't even drive face, and everyone else. And then they start realizing the cost consequences.
Mm-hmm. That the land's quicksand and they can't build bridges.
Or whatever. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So they come back and they say to their constituents, I know I said we were going to build 3 bridges, but ultimately we can only build 1.
Right.
And they want to crucify them.
Right.
Because you're a liar, Mm-hmm. And so my point is, I don't judge those people based only on their promise. I might say to them, well, you should have learned more before you made that promise. That's not a great characteristic.
Right.
But I'm not overly focused on the past. When I'm evaluating somebody who's in government, I'm evaluating them on the process of how do they deal with the conflicting issues that come in front of them.
Just generally, that's a life philosophy. It's not, how you fall. It's how you get back up.
Yeah. And it's also, maybe she made her promise about the 3 bridges, mm-hmm. and then a war in the Ukraine breaks out and gas prices go up and food prices go up and material. Yeah. So the world changes, right?
Yeah.
And so, sure, I can go back and say to that person, you idiot, you should never have promised that. Unless you can deliver on your promises, you shouldn't make the promises.
Yeah, which generally politicians wouldn't make any promises, right? Because you never know what the future holds or what is available. But
if you go back in time, isn't it easy to go back in time?
It is so easy to be an armchair quarterback and judge.
If I were talking to that person, I'd say, why did you say at the time? Like, why was that your priority? Mm-hmm. They might be able to explain it based on the circumstances of that moment and how they got interested in politics. And I'd say that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but now you are in government.
Yeah.
And I expect you to make rational decisions based on new information and current information.
Right.
Even if that means not following your promise.
Right.
So I'm kind of an outlier because a lot of people would say, you're an idiot, John. Right. Politicians have to do what they say. But I would like to just say that I would never want to be a politician. Like, that is a really difficult job because you are being judged on every single thing. What tie you wear, what, how you wear your hair, or what you didn't do today. And I'm just like, seriously, that is a real glass house that you live in. Maybe, but I don't have a lot of sympathy.
Oh, well, I do.
I'll tell you, and in part because
I definitely do.
I'm pretty sure this came up in one of Sandy McFarlane's interviews where he was just talking in passing, and he was like just talking about people generally.
Yeah.
So Sandy McFarlane is a comedian, by the way, if you hadn't heard it yet. He was saying, like what kind of person wakes up in the morning and is like, I can rule the country.
I can rule the world.
Like there's a lot of, I'm not saying I love politicians. A lot of them are egomaniacs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But still, they're being judged over and over and over again.
I'm pretty sure that if you insult a politician's tie, they'll still look in the mirror and think they look wonderful.
Let's hope.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
It is sign-off time, and here we are. It's John and Sheila. We are here in London, England. We've arrived here for 2 days now, and I think we're officially used to the time change.
Maybe. I think so, but we'll see tomorrow.
And this is my second time here, John's first time in London.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so that's really new for me. What's coming up for you, John?
Okay, well, coming up, obviously, the big one is next Sunday I'm doing the marathon, and it's been pretty cool. We've seen a lot of people running around town. I can't help but think that a lot of them are getting ready to do the London Marathon on October 2nd. And I'm feeling pretty good, so I'm optimistic about that. But I'm really having fun here because we have gone on trips before and said, oh, I wish we did this and that, and we're getting some of that stuff done. Mm-hmm. So the two main things to me is we went to a market, found all kinds of great fresh food.
Which is lovely to do on the first day.
Yeah, and you pick some amazing stuff like for like cheese and bread type dinners. And the other thing is we've been spending 2 days getting used to this underground, the tube station, we call it subway, and buses and even trains. And we just are feeling so free because we're using our what are called Oyster cards, which get you on a lot of the transport, and we can pretty much go anywhere. So it's been amazing.
Really great. So tomorrow we're going to be starting our real touristy trip. It's like a little 5-hour tour, and we're going to the theater. So that's exciting. And then we'll be going to Swansea to visit our son's girlfriend.
And shout out to one of our new listeners from the UK, Fiona, who told us a good show to see tomorrow. So we're going to go see Only Fools and Horses, which is supposed to be a pretty funny comedy. And tonight we're trying our first recording of anything for the show in a different country and just off the laptop, straight off the laptop instead of a soundboard. So hopefully it works out.
Yep.
Got anything else, Sheila?
No, that's it.
Okay, well, we hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll be back again next week and hope you can join us.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.